I spent 3 years paying my fiancé's debts, but on our wedding day, he ran away with my best friend. While I was left at the altar, he was enjoying the honeymoon that I paid for. But what he didn't expect was what I would do next. I must admit that the signs were there from the beginning. Mark always had temporary problems with money. On our first date, he forgot his wallet. On the third, his card was declined. But he was so charismatic, so convincing when he said he was just going through a rough patch. And me? I believed him. I didn't just believe, I devoted myself to helping him. Our story began like so many others. A company party, exchanged glances between departments, a smile that seemed too sincere to be fake. Mark worked in marketing while I was a financial analyst. We were perfect opposites. He was creative and expansive. I was methodical and cautious. Perhaps that's why I was drawn into his chaotic and luminous orbit. It's just until I get back on my feet, babe, he promised, as I transferred my Christmas bonus to pay off part of the debts he had with loan sharks. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, he whispered when I signed as a guarantor for his loan to consolidate debts. We're a team. We help each other, he said, when I needed to sell the car my father gave me to cover his credit card debts. I worked as a financials analyst at a bank. Ironic, isn't it? While I organized clients' finances during the day, at night I pored over my fiancé's chaotic spreadsheets. I cut my own expenses, canceled my gym membership, stopped buying clothes. While my friends traveled on vacation, I worked overtime to ensure a promotion that would increase our family income. The first time I needed to lend money to Mark was to pay his overdue rent. My boss delayed my payment. It's temporary, he justified. I transferred the amount immediately, without questioning. The following month, it was the building fees. Then the electricity bill that was about to be cut off. Financial emergencies kept accumulating, and with them, my temporary help. Every penny I invested in our debts, actually, in his debts, was one less penny in my future. My dreams of pursuing a postgraduate degree were postponed. The international trip I had been planning since college canceled. The investment to buy my own property reduced to almost nothing. My mother was suspicious. Honey, is he really changing, or has he just transferred the financial responsibility to you? I defended Mark tooth and nail. I even distanced myself from her for a while when she insisted I was being naive. You don't understand, Mom. He's had bad luck. He lost his previous job, had to help his family, invested in a business that went wrong. It's circumstances, not character. The worst part is that I believed it. I believed I was being the heroine of the story, the partner who doesn't abandon ship in the storm. I secretly prided myself on being different from those who only want financially stable partners. I was building something real, based on true love, not material security. What irony. Money fights were constant, but they always ended with Mark acknowledging his fault and promising to do better. I'll work more, look for another side job, save every penny. The promises lasted a week, maybe 2. Then we'd return to the same cycle. I worked 2 jobs for 8 months to help cover a failed investment Mark had made in cryptocurrency without consulting me. He cried, said he just wanted to give us a better life, that he bet our savings thinking he'd multiply them. We lost everything, or rather, I lost, because the money was mine. Our wedding would be simple, I told everyone. We don't want to start our life together with more debt. The truth? We couldn't afford anything lavish. Still, I saved for months to have a dignified ceremony. Nothing extravagant, 80 guests, a modest buffet, a nice but affordable dress. I chose every detail with care, always calculating costs, comparing prices, seeking discounts. Mark participated little in the preparations. I trust your good taste, babe. In reality, he was too busy with networking opportunities that always involved expensive happy hours and dinners I couldn't attend because I was saving for our big day. Jessica, my best friend since college, would be my maid of honor. She had always been the glamorous friend, a photo model, international travels, designer clothes. When Mark met her, I remember noticing something strange in his gaze, a different sparkle, but I dismissed the thought. He was with me, planning our wedding. I trusted them both. Jessica always commented how lucky I was to have found such a handsome and charismatic man. If you two ever break up, let me know so I can have him for myself, she joked. I laughed, because it was too absurd to take seriously. Friends don't do that. Real friends don't desire each other's partners, not even in jokes. In the months leading up to the wedding, I noticed that Jessica and Mark had developed their own communication. Inside jokes, knowing looks. We're practically family now, they justified. When I mentioned my discomfort, Mark accused me of irrational jealousy. Do you want me to cut ties with your best friend? That would be weird, don't you think? I felt small and insecure for having questioned. 3 weeks before the wedding, I caught Mark texting Jessica at 2 in the morning. We need to talk about the surprise gift for Kate, he quickly explained, referring to me. I believed him because I wanted to believe, because the alternative was too painful to consider. In the week of the wedding, Mark seemed distant. It's just nerves, I justified to myself. The day before the ceremony, Jessica didn't show up for the rehearsal. Work problems, she said via message, another sign I ignored. The morning of my wedding arrived with a perfect blue sky. Ironically, it was the most beautiful day of that month. I woke up early, anxious and happy. My cousins came to help me with hair and makeup. I sent a message to Mark, "Can't wait to see you at the altar." He replied with just a heart emoji. I thought it was strange, but attributed it to the tradition of not communicating much on the wedding day. The time came to go to the ceremony venue, a small ranch on the outskirts of the city, simple but charming, with a white gazebo where we would exchange vows. As I got dressed in the small room reserved for the bride, I noticed that Jessica still hadn't arrived. I called, voicemail, sent a message, not seen. My father was waiting to walk me down the aisle. I noticed he seemed tense. "Is everything okay, Dad?" I asked. He hesitated. "Honey," Mark called. My heart froze. The message was simple. He wasn't coming. He couldn't go through with it. He needed to find his true self. No mention of Jessica, who also didn't show up. I was paralyzed. The words made no sense. It was as if I was hearing in another language. "What do you mean he's not coming? It's our wedding. People are arriving." My father held my hands. He said, "You can explain to the guests however you want that he's very sorry for everything. Very sorry. Very sorry. 3 years of my life, tens of thousands of dollars, my dreams postponed, all to end with a very sorry over the phone." On our wedding day, the guests were already arriving. The officiant looked at me with pity. My mother was crying in the corner, and me? I was strangely calm, a calm that comes after the bomb explodes and the dust settles, revealing complete destruction. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't be the abandoned bride who flees through the back door. I stood on a chair and asked for everyone's attention. "Thank you for coming. Unfortunately, there will be no wedding today. Mark decided he doesn't want to go through with this. But since we've paid for the buffet and drinks, please stay and enjoy. Consider this a liberation party." There was an awkward silence, followed by murmurs. Some people came to hug me. Others seemed not to know what to do. My mother took control, directing the waiters to serve drinks, playing music, trying to salvage what could be saved from that day. The party continued without the bride and groom. Many came to hug me, offer condolences. I smiled, drank champagne, and tried to understand what had happened, where I had gone wrong, what I could have done differently. I spent what would have been my wedding night at my parents' house, alone in my old room, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened. I called Mark dozens of times. All went to voicemail. I sent messages. None were seen. It was only 2 days later, scrolling through Instagram, that I found the answer. A story from a resort in Miami. Jessica in a bikini, kissing Mark on the mouth. The caption, "When you finally find your true love, start your new life." The money for the honeymoon we saved, actually that I saved, was being spent by them. The dress I paid for alone still hanging in the closet. And the debts? The debts remained with me. The double betrayal was like taking a punch to the stomach. My fiancé and my best friend, together, planning this while I organized our wedding, using money I saved while I was left behind, not only with a broken heart, but also with bills to pay. I tried to understand when it began. I mentally revisited every interaction between them, every message, every look. How many times had Jessica come to our house when I wasn't there? How many of Mark's work meetings were meetings with her? In an impulse of anger, I sent a message to both. "I hope you're very happy. Just one thing. Who's going to pay the $87,000 in debt I still have in my name because of you, Mark?" No response. I called Mark immediately after. Voicemail. I sent another message. "We need to talk about the loan." He saw it, but didn't respond. I contacted Jessica. "How could you do this?" I was blocked. I spent a week in a state of numbness. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep. I alternated between crying fits and an anger that consumed me from within. My friends tried to help, but I isolated myself. The humiliation was too great. That's when I made a decision. I would not be the victim of this story. For 3 years, I was manipulated by someone who claimed to love me. It was time to turn the tables. First, I organized all the documentation. Every bank transfer, every loan, every payment I made on Mark's behalf. I created a digital folder with everything meticulously cataloged and dated. If he thought he could simply disappear without consequences, he was very wrong. Then, I went to the bank where I worked and explained my situation to the director, showing evidence that Mark now had sufficient income to take on the loan alone. I managed to start a process to remove my name as a guarantor. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. A colleague from the legal department referred me to a lawyer specializing in cases of debt and shared financial responsibility. In the first consultation, I brought all the documents. The lawyer listened to my story carefully and then said something that gave me hope. "We have a solid case here," He used you financially. This can be characterized as a type of economic abuse. I hired the lawyer. We prepared an extrajudicial notification demanding reimbursement for everything I spent on Mark's debts with interest. I included every documented penny in my meticulous spreadsheets. The notification also mentioned that if there was no response, within 15 days we would file a lawsuit. Next, I did something I never imagined doing. I called Mark's parents. They had always been kind to me and seemed unaware of their son's true financial nature. I calmly explained the situation, without drama, just facts. The silence on the other end of the line was followed by a, "We'll talk to him." Mark's mother called me the next day, crying. "I don't know how we raised a son like this," she lamented. "He's always been problematic with money, but I never thought he'd go this far." She asked me for details about the debts and promised to do what she could. I felt sorry for her, but I couldn't back down. It was no longer just about money, but about justice. Meanwhile, Mark and Jessica were posting photos of their dream life: luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, yacht trips. With each post, I saved it as evidence of his current financial capacity. My lawyer was building a solid case. A mutual friend told me that the two were telling everyone that their relationship began after my engagement to Mark ended, a blatant lie that many seemed to believe. Their narrative was convenient. Two lovers who couldn't resist true love. The reality? A man who spent his fiancé's money for years and then ran away with her best friend on the wedding day, leaving her with astronomical debts. A week later, I received a call from Mark's father. "He's come back home. Jessica left him when the money ran out. He's remorseful." "Great," I replied. "Tell him to contact my lawyer. We have a lot to resolve." Apparently, the unplanned honeymoon lasted exactly as long as the money Mark had saved in recent weeks, probably hiding part of the salary that should have been going toward our debts. Jessica, accustomed to a high-standard lifestyle, wasn't willing to live with someone in debt. How ironic. Mark tried the emotional route. Tearful calls at 3 a.m. "It was a mistake, I still love you." Messages begging for forgiveness. "I don't know what came over me. She seduced me." He even showed up at my door with flowers once. He found only a process server delivering the notification. "Can't we talk about this? Resolve it like adults?" he begged via message afterward. "We are talking through the appropriate legal channels," I responded. Part of me wanted to scream at him, ask how he could do this to me after everything I did for him. But I realized that any direct conversation would just be an opportunity for more manipulation. He would use my feelings against me as he always had. Mutual friends tried to mediate. "He's really sorry," they said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." I gave him 3 years of second chances, I replied. Now it's time to be accountable. As for Jessica, I discovered it wasn't the first time she had done this. A former college classmate reached out to me. She did the same thing to my sister. Stole her boyfriend a week before the engagement. Other stories emerged. A pattern formed. Apparently, the challenge of conquering committed men was something Jessica had practiced for years. The fact that they were partners of her friends made the hunt more exciting, a relational psychopathy that I could now see clearly, but which had previously been hidden under layers of false friendship. 1 month after the non-wedding, Mark finally agreed to take on all the debts and reimburse me for what I spent in the last 3 years. Not out of generosity, but because the evidence against him was overwhelming, and my lawyer made it clear that I wouldn't hesitate to take the case further, even if it tarnished his newly established professional reputation. The agreement was signed in a cold law office. Mark seemed smaller somehow, less bright, less convincing. The man I thought was the love of my life was now nothing more than a pathetic stranger sitting across the table. "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked as he signed the papers. "I already have," I replied honestly. "But forgiveness isn't reconciliation. It's liberation. I'm freeing myself from you." He tried to say something else, but the lawyer interrupted. "This meeting is strictly for legal purposes." Mark nodded and left with his head down. It was the last time I saw him in person. I left that office feeling an enormous weight lifted from my shoulders. The process of recovering my money would be long, but every penny that came back would be invested in myself, something I had forgotten to do in recent years. In the months that followed, I rediscovered who I was without Mark. I started going to places I had abandoned because he didn't like them. I took up hobbies again, reconnected with friends. I realized how much of myself I had sacrificed in that relationship, not just financially. I started therapy to understand why I allowed myself to be used for so long, why I ignored so many warning signs, why I prioritized someone who clearly didn't value me to the same extent. "You believed you were investing in your future," my therapist explained. "The problem is that it was a one-sided investment. He was taking, not contributing." Slowly, I began to see patterns in my relationship history. I had always been the caretaker, the problem solver, the one who sacrificed. It was time to break this cycle. 6 months later, I moved to another city. I accepted a better job offer, started studying for exams, returned to the gym. I took care of my finances as I always knew. How this time only for my own benefit, I established clear boundaries. I opened new bank accounts, changed all passwords, created a financial system completely separate from any memory of Mark. I consulted a financial planner to chart a path that would allow me to recover lost time. Mark still tries to contact me. Occasionally. Last text. I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better. I didn't respond. Some messages don't deserve a response. Jessica also tried a reconciliation. It was a moment of weakness. I'm really sorry. I blocked her number. True friendships don't have moments of weakness like that. The money Mark agreed to return started arriving in monthly installments. Each deposit is a reminder of what I went through, but also of my strength to overcome. I created a specific fund with this money. Not for emergencies, not for basic needs, but to fulfill dreams I postponed because of him. I internally call it my emotional reparation fund. Allowing myself to dream again was perhaps the most difficult step. For a long time, I lived in financial survival mode, always counting pennies, always afraid of the next economic disaster. Learning to plan for the future with hope, not fear, has been a liberating process. Today, almost a year later, I am a different person, stronger, more cautious, but not bitter. I learned to recognize financial red flags. I learned that love isn't annihilating yourself to build up another. I learned that I am more resilient than I imagined. I started dating recently, slowly, with caution. On the third date, when he forgot his wallet, I smiled politely, paid the bill, and never answered his calls again. Some patterns are too easy to identify. Now, another sign of progress. I can laugh at my story. Not at the pain, of course, but at the absurdity of the situation. My ex-fiancé ran away with my maid of honor on our wedding day is a line that always shocks at parties. It's almost comical in its perfect structure of betrayal. And what about that wedding dress? I sold it online for a good price. The money went into my emergency fund, something I promised never to compromise for anyone again. The apartment where I would have lived with Mark was rented to someone else. The gifts that some guests insisted on leaving, I donated to charity. I wanted nothing that reminded me of that day. If there's one lesson I take from this whole story, never put someone else's financial future above your own. You can help, but not at your own expense. Because when everything falls apart, it's your own foundations that sustain you. Have you ever been through something similar? How did you deal with financial or emotional betrayal? Sometimes, the most painful stories bring the greatest lessons. P.S. Mark declared bankruptcy last month. Not that I'm keeping track, but news like that reaches you. They say he's back living with his parents. As for me, I just put a down payment on my own apartment. No guarantors, no debts, not depending on anyone but myself. And that, believe me, is worth more than any marriage. And you, if you were in her place, what would you have done differently? Leave your comment.